What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, and I have to just completely roast the Game Gear Micro because this system is so bizarre. I actually had to check twice to make sure that this was real and not an April Fool's joke. It is a product that makes completely zero sense, and I say this as a Game Gear collector. I don't talk about this very much, but of course, I'm somebody who has a lot of different video games, and my speciality, the main thing I love to try and track down and get, is Sega games, and so I've even gotten a couple Game Gears in perfect condition, and even some super rare Game Gear games like Mega Man. Well, even I, somebody who loves Sega and who loves Sega collecting, I think that this product is bizarre, but I want to try and break down the major problems with it, starting off with the size itself. I mean, micro is an understatement. So here's the official press release here talking about what makes this system so special and grand, but here's the weird part right at the start. The Game Gear Micro is currently only available for pre-order in Japan. It will launch on October 6th. As of now, there's no Western release for the device. The console has a 1-inch screen and will arrive in 4 color schemes, each with a different set of preloaded games. It has a 1-inch screen. I don't know how this is real. So what I decided to do is, when I was growing up, obviously I got to be there during the height of the Nintendo-Sega console wars. At all times, they were constantly trying to bash into each other. It was always Genesis versus Super Nintendo and stuff like that. Well, this, of course, also went over to their handheld divisions. People are always trying to compare the Game Boy, which I absolutely loved, and the Game Gear, which I loved, but I'll admit to a lesser extent. The RPGs, especially Pokemon and stuff, was a huge seller, but one of the things that I think the Game Gear got right was it had a bigger screen. This is something I thought was always interesting, is that Nintendo didn't mind experimenting. Nintendo would try and release different weird products of different sizes, different variations, and if you'll remember, 15 years ago, they dropped something that did get them a little bit of criticism, which was the Game Boy Micro. Do you remember this thing? Look how tiny it was. The major thing that Nintendo fans hated was that almost everybody said, this is unplayably tiny. Look at this. It is so small, if you tried to play any of the RPGs and stuff, the text was literally unreadable. Well, I decided to bust out a ruler. Check out my handy dandy giant ruler. Let's look at 1 inch. So here is 1 inch. This is the size of the screen of just the Game Gear Micro. Now let's put it up against this. I'm going to try and hold it up to the camera here so you can see. As you can see, as adorably tiny as this thing is, the screen itself is actually 1.5 inches, which means that this thing, as itty-bitty as it is going to be 50% bigger than the Game Gear Micro. I mean, these games are going to be just, you're not even going to be able to see what's going on screen. Now let's get to the real part here that I think is very bizarre, which is this. You can't get all the games at once. Instead of trying to do it like the other micro consoles did, like the PlayStation Mini, the Super Nintendo Mini, a lot of these decided to just package in the 20 best games. They sold it once. It was kind of just a one and done deal. Well, here they're trying to get you to buy 4 different variants. Okay, let me just say, this is the number one reason I'm not buying it. Right here, this specifically, each of the consoles has 4 games on it, which we're going to get into more specifically here in a second. Each of them costs $50. Each of these costs $50, which means that if you want every single one of the Game Gear Micro games, you have to pay $200 total. A big issue I've had with some of these mini consoles is the ones that feel overpriced. I mean, in my opinion, the biggest reason you buy these micro consoles is because it's just such an all-in-one package. It's getting the best games that you grew up with, and they're putting them on one system with an HDMI for one small price, right? I mean, I feel like that makes perfect sense. Well, they decided to go the opposite direction and make this as expensive as possible. $50 each. But maybe it's not the screen size, maybe it's not the price, maybe the games are fantastic. Well, on the black one, you're getting Sonic the Hedgehog, Puyo Puyo 2, which I will admit, I'm absolutely obsessed with Puyo Puyo, Outrun, and Royal Stone. This is a pretty good one. Of all of these, I think that one's my favorite. The blue one has Sonic and Tails, Gunstar Heroes, Sylvan Tale, Baku Baku Animal. Yellow has Shining Force 1, Shining Force 2, Shining Force Gaiden Final Conflict, and Nazu Poyo Aerial no Ru. And then the red one has Revelations the Demon Slayer, Megami Tensei Gaiden Last Bible Special, The GG Shinobi, and Columns. This is the one that I think collectors are probably going to be the most into because these are some very, very rare games, but I'm still just blown away as to what the target demographic is. I am a huge Sega collector. Obviously, I have every Sega game for this Dreamcast. I have a bunch of Sega Saturn games. I have a bunch of really rare Sega CD stuff. I even have the Sega Nomad. I mean, most people don't even remember this thing exists, but not only that, I actually have it. I have it here in my collection with the battery pack, all the rare games like the 6-in-1. I mean, this, to me, Sega collecting is very enjoyable because a lot of these games are obscure and cool. There was an opportunity here to do something great. And more importantly, I think that Sega had a chance to beat Nintendo to the punch. I was very excited about the idea of sometime getting a Game Boy Classic Edition. I've been so thrilled about the idea of what if they decided to package together a bunch of old school retro RPGs and, platformers and stuff and put them onto one little Game Boy and then maybe give it an HDMI out. Maybe have like a version of the Super Game Boy for it so we could still play it on our TVs. That seems amazing, but part of that requires time, effort, dedication, and a willingness to do it right. Sega's product is baffling to me because it seems to miss all those steps. I mean, in all three categories, it just manages to miss the mark. It doesn't seem very visible, it doesn't seem like the games themselves are even that spectacular, and the price is downright egregious. The dumbest thing of all, though, I still once again have to say, this is real. If you purchase them all together, which they're already sold out if you try and get the bundle, which I'm not sure why anybody's pre-ordering this, but if you decided to pre-order all four at once, they give you a tiny magnifying glass. The original adjustment, there was like a special add-on for the Game Gear itself. They decided to make a tiny version of it so you can amplify that 1-inch screen. Could you imagine having to pay $200 up front to get 16 games and a magnifying glass? I am still just in utter shock as to how this is supposed to be good. Sega, you guys have done a lot of stuff that's really great. I think that the way you've managed to shake up the industry with your games, how you've turned yourself into such a great publisher, the way you've managed to pump money into weird series like Yakuza and blow them up to be more mainstream, a lot of what Sega does is impressive because it works. They manage to just go and blaze their own path. And a big thing I always see is, when is Sega going to make consoles again? And I've always kind of believed the fact that they don't need to. They're doing something different. They're over here making the games they want to play, the stuff they want to see. They're creating the art that they themselves think is important. And so the fact that they decided to do this, it might not even come to America. I have a feeling that it maybe will get a lukewarm reception, but if this comes to America, I'm probably not going to buy it. Or if I do buy it, I am certainly not buying all four. That seems like a waste of money. That may seem brutal, but absolutely buying these things, it seems like a waste of money, even as a collector. But I might pick one of them up and do a video on it, but even that seems a little bit doubtful. But what do you think? Are you actually excited for the Game Gear Micro, or does this just seem like a baffling decision by Sega? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I'm still just blown away by this because I've always kind of dreamed about the idea of bringing back Sega hardware. I've always thought that if we got a Dreamcast Mini or a Sega Saturn Mini, those could be great. And the first thing they give us is a Game Gear Micro. I mean, Sega, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this term, but read the room. Listen to what people actually want. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.